Rose here, and thank you for all of those of you joining me for the entire year. For this week, week 31, and I recommend watching them in sequence, I want to focus on attunement and the art of meta-conversation, the art of meta-conversation in ourselves, but also in relationship. So first of all, what is meta-conversation? A meta-conversation is a conversation about the conversation. Metaphysics is, so far as I can tell, an overlay on top of typical physical physics. So it's kind of something about something. But certainly in terms of dialogue and focus. So an example of that is we're talking about attunement, and we're talking about a year of well-being. A meta-conversation might be to say, well, let's step back a little bit and look at what is well-being. We're talking about attunement. A meta-conversation might be, how's my face? Meaning, obviously, I've just gotten out of bed, but how's the proximity? Do you feel more comfortable if I'm back here? If I'm here? If I'm here? What's the distance? Like, I feel comfortable kind of between here and somewhere in this range. And a little bit of movement creates some engagement. But how is that for you? Now, this is a conversation that is about or happening in between the conversation. How close should we be when we talk? How's my volume? This is, again, a meta-conversation. It's an injection of another dimension while the other dimension is continuing on. And meta being, I think, a Latin word, it may have a number of different meanings, but that's what I'm going to refer to it as for this conversation, is conversations about the conversation, conversations that bring more transparency by bringing dimension. So if we're just talking about the topic, that's a one-dimensional conversation. You know, every other topic relative to the topic and relative to the way that we are talking about the topic is a meta-conversation, and it adds a dimension. So, as I say, one would be body proximity. One would be temperature. How's the temperature in the room for you? You too hot? You too cold? How's my body proximity? How's my volume? How's the background music? You like it? You don't like it? You rather silence or some background ambiance? How's the lighting? Are you hungry? Do you need the toilet? Do you need a break? Conversation topic aside, what's your attention span? Is it 30 seconds or 90 minutes? Before you lose the thread of what I'm talking about. This may come up for you. One of the things that I've learned in a variety of meta-conversations with people over the year is that I can listen to someone talk for 5, 10, 20, 30, 60 minutes. I can listen to someone talk for 2 or 3 hours. And if they need just listening, I can track it all. I'm very interested, and then after the end of 2 or 3 hours, I can go back and say, okay, early on in the conversation you said this. By the end of the conversation you said this. It sounds like you've changed your feeling from the beginning of the conversation to the end. Did you notice that? And what's that about for you? I can say something like that, and that's within my attention span. Other people interrupt me at 30-second mark, 1 minute mark, and I'm not even at the main point yet. And I say, could you just give me a minute here? And they say, no, I can't. And it's like, why? I can give you 1, 2, 3 hours. And they say, well, I'll forget what I had to, I'll forget what I had to say. So you learn, okay, you've got a 30-second attention span. I've got a 3-hour attention span. So what are we going to do? Since I tend to be either, depending on how you call it, long-winded or build thoughts closely and intricately, so for me, it's kind of like a tapestry weave. So I'm bringing in different threads, and it's not any one point. It's the pattern of how this thread weaves like this and interacts with this thread like this, and then this thread is over here, and this thread is over here, and it creates a certain composition. And if you interrupt when I'm at this point here, we're not at the point I'm interested in talking about. What I'm interested in talking about is the composition of this thread, this thread, this thread, connected in this area with this thread in this area. And that creates a composition. And it's the what we can learn from the composition, not a given thread that I'm as interested in. So this is relating to one of my emphases in general and strengths, which is pattern analysis. I'd send you off to Tom Rath's Strength Finder 2.0, to discover your strengths. So, So pattern analysis is, is interesting. So we're in a meta conversation. So how's the meta conversation? So first of all, the topic. Then the meta conversation is, what does the topic mean? Then the meta conversation of that is different things that it could mean. And then the meta conversation about that is different attention spans in my life. And then the meta conversation about that is the way that one person can be focused on a thread and want to respond to a thread, while someone else is interested in the tapestry that thread is a part of and not the thread. So you can see the problem if you say, what do you think of this art? And one person says, well, this gold thread going there weaves like this, like this, like this, like this, and like this, and I don't get it. And the other person says, well, I kind of like the way the green and the gold work together, and right here it's puffy. It's kind of like the threads all puff out. There's this thick weave, and it just has, I don't know, it's very satisfying the way that puffs out right there. The other person says, well, I I don't get it. This thread is straight here, then it's wobbly here, and it curls over around here. I mean, which is it? Is it straight? Is it wobbly? Like, what's going on? And then the other person responds, these blue and gold colors over here, the way these threads come together, that's a very interesting pattern. In fact, I've seen that pattern over here, and I've seen it here, and I've seen it here. In fact, the common denominator of that pattern is, it seems like these are all Nordic artists. So might I deduce, given how little that this thread work tends to be a little bit more of a Nordic activity, and that they're comfortable with abstractions? Or is this not an abstraction? Is this supposed to be a representation of nature? And the other person's like, yeah, I'm not sure what you're seeing there. So we're looking at not only different views, different landscapes, we're looking at the different views that are possible with different attention spans. You see, because if someone has a 30-second attention span, they cannot juxtapose the first 30 minutes of this motif with the next 40 minutes and the next 90 minutes. They cannot bring those two threads together because we're dealing with the size of the lens. The attention span is in part the size of the lens. And so if there's a pattern that's going across this whole lens here that we can see because we're outside of this set here, and there's just one little bit of that pattern that's going on inside this little lens, you can see that the only thing that would be relevant to our attention if our eye was this big is this one little wave. But if we're out here, we're interested in how that one little wave interacts with all the other waves. And if we're outside on the whole board, we're interested in how this idea ties in with this idea. And if we're an aesthetic, if we're interested in aesthetics and we're more masculine, what we're focusing on is how fast we can get from A to B. So A to B means, like I could say this whole presentation in 1 minute. Like that's the fastest we could go. Attunement. You want to get on the same page with the person you're with before you build a business, before you build a relationship, before you can co-create something together. Attunement. You want to understand the values, the preferences, the rhythms, the angles of perception, the past experiences, the physiological influences. And once you understand that with a partner, with a friend, with a child of yours, with your parents, you can speak the same language, number one. And number two, as a result of speaking the same language and being respectful of the varying things impacting one another, can improve your relationship. So this would be a relatively direct way of saying attunement. But I'm off over here. This is a more feminine way of exploring attunement. First of all, to bring in a subcategory, the meta-conversation, a tool, then talk about the way. In other words, the more indirect the conversation, the more feminine it is, the more indirect. There's the direct path from A to B, and then there's the 10,000-mile journey as we start off here, and then we go in here, and then we go here, and then we go round up here, and then we go up here, and we look at it from above, and we look at it from below, and then we look at it from the side, we look at it from the back. Then we decide we don't even want to go to the thumb. Then we decide, what's the meaning of a thumb after all? And why are we here anyway? And then it's back up here. And then let's travel over and see what they have to say over here. And then let's try it over here. And then at the end of it all, we come back to, okay, here we are. This is a thumb, and this is what we think about a thumb. But maybe it's not this. And so this is very indirect. The feminine is all about the journey. And these blogs are intended in sequence, in order. And so we've spent an entire time exploring chauvinism and the masculine feminine bias and this and that. So I won't go into that fully here. But this is a very feminine way of looking in. And you know, the feminine gets enamored. You know, it's like it's going along and then touches this cashmere, and it's like, oh, this is so soft, and it's lost in that. And then over here, and then over here, feminine is more embodied. And so we're getting into this kind of sense here of the fact that someone with a 30-second attention span will, by definition, have a different world than someone with a 1 hour, 2 hour, 20-minute attention span. Because it's a little bit like someone with a 30-second memory for taste. You ever had cantaloupe? Here we are in a new meta-conversation, a new example. A more feminine and circuitous way of going about it. You ever had cantaloupe? Draw it out, be a little bit more feminine, engage the right brain. You ever had cantaloupe? And then poured a little tablespoon of Grand Marnier into the chilled, crisp, sweet, juicy cantaloupe. And then inside of that, having nicely scooped it out, we have blueberries. Now you know why, on a subconscious level, I chose a blue marker, a meta-conversation, and a joke about a meta-conversation. Because blueberries, clearly being the most important element of the conversation, deserve their own color. So have you ever had cantaloupe? Here's you put it in the fridge the night before. In the morning, you slice it in half, long ways. Stem to stem. Scoop out the stuff. Pour in 1 to 2 dashes of Grand Marnier, and then either just freshly washed, crisped organic blueberries, or blueberries and strawberries. And then with a spoon, eat it so that every bit of cantaloupe is dipped in the bottom pool of Grand Marnier and has either a strawberry or blueberry or both with it. Have you ever had that? It is absolutely exquisite. See, if it can be gotten onto one spoonful, you can enjoy that entire taste with only a 10-second memory. But if it has to be in sequence, like you want orange juice and coffee, I always like that one, fresh squeezed orange juice and coffee. So you got those, I like to sip those back and forth. But then about maybe 20 minutes after that, not at the same time, 20 minutes after that, then I have my lemon and soda. And it's with that I like the passion fruit, the chilled passion fruit, with the sliced buffalo mozzarella. Why buffalo mozzarella? To bring in yet another meta conversation. See, what we're doing is we're going deep into meta. We're doing conversations about the conversation, about the conversation, about the conversation, about the conversation. This is meta. And at each level, if you have the attention span, or if you are not obsessed with getting to the point, we're coming into rapport. Now, of course, this works a lot better if you're here and you're engaging. It works a lot better if you're having a taste of this cantaloupe and then a taste of this buffalo mozzarella. And if, rather than being given exactly what my favorite exquisite tastes are in the morning, you're being given what your favorite tastes are, because that's a key part of the meta. That's a key part of attunement. It's like, this is what I would like, and in a healthy dynamic, this sparks you to join me for a moment in your mind through your mirror neurons, in imagining what all that tastes like, getting to know me a little better, and saying, you know, I can see that. Yes, you love weird things, and you probably had a great time inventing this. It's kind of like that cinnamon you put in the beans last night. You know, that's okay. But what I like porridge. Well, what's that about for you? Porridge? Fattening, lumpy porridge? It's like, yes, you know, my dad used to make me porridge every single morning. And we would just sit together, and I'd be his little girl eating porridge. It's like, oh, I see. So it's probably not as much about the porridge as being connected and sharing something with Dad. You know, it's like, well, okay, I'll go with that. I haven't analyzed it. It's you know, and so so this is meta conversations about meta conversations about meta conversations. So meta conversations have the general physical dimension, meaning, how's my body to you? What's the volume like? How's the music? The lighting? Like, for me, the lighting's a little bit bright for this time of day. But the idea of talking about this at this time of day, great. And, you know, I don't have control over how these videos are watched in sequence and all that. So I feel like I can't be completely informal in a culture as judgmental as ours, because there's a whole segment of people that all they have to do is look at the video quality, you know, in lighting, audio, video, and stuff, and just, they make a decision in 1 second on the intelligence or the value of the content based on these shortcuts, which brings me to another key point in meta conversations, which is that one meta conversation that's very important to have if you're trying to connect with someone is the shortcuts that we use to determine someone's value. Now, I should add a bit that is often left out as we determine someone's value. The shortcuts that we use to determine someone's value to us, or to determine how much value we are capable of seeing in another. And this is a very important distinction, because these shortcuts are wrong all the time, in some exceptions, and they are short, meaning they are limiting, even when they're right. Meaning, what I mean is, even if you use, like some people use the shortcuts of shoes. They use the shortcut of shoes, they use the shortcut of haircut, they use the shortcut of accent. And if someone has a nice haircut, let's say a suit, good shoes, nice haircut, and an accent, there is a demographic of people who will instantly attribute higher social status and will pay double the amount to what that person says than they will to someone with dirty clothes, for example, and not particularly nice shoes that has a more, I don't know if the term is colloquial? Anyway, I don't use that word. But, in England it would be a Cockney accent, as opposed to a posh accent. And they'll determine a lot of that. So this may be, so this is a relatively reasonable, for example, shortcut to determining if someone has a lot of money. But not always, since a number of billionaires get a great kick out of, looking the exact opposite. But it does not determine, this may be an accurate determination of money, but it then doesn't accurately determine how valuable the interaction could be for you. Because you may have fallen into the trap, the shortcut trap, of thinking someone who has more money is actually more important or has something more valuable for you, because money is the most valuable thing in the world, right? So you may have assumed that. And in fact, it could be that the one with dirty clothes is more accepting, smiles more relaxed, has more time, doesn't interrupt you with a text as you're trying to talk. And so one of the great delights that I have is learning all the ways that everything my culture uses in its shortcuts to denigrate gives me more than everything my culture tells me to honor. So, my culture would tell me to honor President Trump. Why? Because he's the president, and because he's rich, and da-da-da-da-da. And so my culture would have me believing that I would get more out of spending time with Trump than a young beggar boy in Pakistan. Why? Because Pakistan is a boy, and boys are, of course, less valuable than men. Then he's poor, and poor people are, of course, less valuable than rich people. And then he has no education. And, uneducated people are, of course, more valuable than educated people. So I should be spending time with Bush and not the Pakistani kid I see running around. But the assumptions about wealth and whether or not they have an Ivy League education, etc., may be quite accurate. But the conclusion that I will receive more value may be completely inaccurate, because the assumption that value comes from left brain education and money, etc., could be false relative to what I enjoy. Now, certainly if I'm looking to make connections, to make more money from more money, odds are that I can do a horrible deal, according to the Scottish people, with President Trump that will be an expensive and disappointing ordeal of, false promises, etc. But it will involve a lot of money. And just take a little poke here. And on the other hand, I'm not going to do a large, disappointing deal with this kid. But if I value vitality, if I value candor, and some people, you just see the candor and the innocence. You can talk with a young boy for 10, 20 minutes and remember how easy it is to tell the truth. Because it doesn't even occur to him to lie. It just says exactly what he sees, and you look at it, and it all makes perfect sense from his experience. You realize in eternity, when talking with this boy, that you didn't know. You didn't know you'd forgotten it. You didn't know you didn't know it. But he knows it. He's known it for a long time. He is rich in that terrain. He knows it more than your therapist knows it. And he doesn't have to say a word. He just has to be himself. And that could be more precious than all the billions. Learned here and not here. So this is why it's valuable. See, because what happens is we put together programs, and the culture brainwashes us into programs of evaluating someone in a wide variety of ways. And then it puts labels of good and bad. So-and-so lost their temper, that's bad, stay away from that person. So-and-so wears very nice shoes. So-and-so has a very expensive watch, that's good, try and marry him. In the old chauvinistic paradigms. And we do these things, and it makes it very easy to game the system, because if you remember our brain, it can't remember more than about a 10-digit phone number in most cases. So what it's doing is it's going from one little bit of data to another and to another, and then it has a sense, an instinct of memory, an instinct that over there that was good, but in the moment it can't remember why it was good, why it was bad. It just remembered, gold. But that heuristic shortcut is not adequate to assess the fact that, in fact, it could be the exact opposite. It could be the sign of a scam. It could be, it's when you know that a gold watch, a Rolls Royce, and this and that and the other are all good, it's not too hard to cobble together the symbols that everyone's told us is good in order to bring bad meat to the table and have it be ignored, meaning it's not examined, because it's coming in such a nice package. This is what conjurers and stuff do all the time, is steal your wallet while you're looking over here at these wonderful items. Back to attunement. One of the most important things about attunement is to know one another's shortcuts. I had a person once that told me I do something with my eyes. That means I'm lying. So she's telling me her shortcut. Like she's read some book, How to Tell If People Lie. And it's obviously not a complex enough shortcut, meaning maybe that's a clue 20% of the time. Maybe that's a clue for 80% of people. But the same eye movement can come with a sensitive, for example, who's overwhelmed by an emotion and, looking down. So the reason it's important to understand the shortcuts is to be on the same page. It's actually a great gift of trust when you understand the shortcuts. For example, well, there's, I have a number of shortcuts, and I actually create shortcuts. And they may be wrong, meaning I have to do them to be efficient, but they may be wrong. In fact, I would say I already know that a great number of my shortcuts are wrong a lot of the time. They're just better than nothing. In other words, when to go into one more meta conversation, when I was trying to overcome an aspect of Thai culture, which is to ignore all of this kind of stuff. This is not a Thai culture kind of conversation. It's Thai being an even more feminine culture, language and mental distinctions which distract to a certain degree from just smiling and presence is more masculine than tonal and facial expressions. So if I was being really feminine in the Thai sense, I'd be laughing more, I'd be smiling more, I'd be getting on with doing something and spending time. I certainly wouldn't be making a video. And when I see 5 or 6 Thai women together, one of the most common words is "aw, aw, aw, ha ha ha, ah, and they're moving and they're using tone to communicate different levels of sympathy, empathy, outrage. They're using tone, and they're present, and they're engaged, and it's a physical conversation. They're walking around each other and this and that. It's a dance. It's a dance that involves the whole body. And I bring in something like this. How much do you know about the art of attunement and meta conversations? And ja. It's like, they're not going to waste their time with this, They'll smile. How are you? They're delighted, with a smile back. This is a very, on a mental level, masculine type of thing. To divide the whole into this many slices. And this is why I love Thailand. The whole is largely whole. It's not broken into so many tiny pieces with every little boundary between every little piece, because this is the Western motif. It's you take the whole, you break this bit into here, this bit's there, this bit's there, this bit's there, this bit's there, and then what's the most educated Western mind do once it's broken the whole up into all these little boxes of this and that and the other? The Western mind, the sign of the greatest sophistication on the planet, according to the Western mind, is the critic that says, no, we broke the whole multiverse down into, 6 million different words, and you've just used the wrong word for the wrong thing. That word doesn't belong here in this little box. It belongs over here. You spelled you forgot to cross the T. And it doesn't even matter that I know you forgot to cross the T. What matters is you didn't do it. And hurry, go study where T's go, and da-da-da-da-da. In other words, having broken the multiverse down into infinite fragments just by erecting language and saying this is this and this isn't this, which is all reality is, it's language. You think a newborn says this is a tree and this is a ground? No, a newborn sees life. And it doesn't even know the difference between this is me and this is nature. It doesn't know what nature is. This is language. We've invented this crap. You are here. That's there. You are you. That's not you. Wait a minute, if it's not me, how come I have to eat it to stay alive? How come my poop grows it? Well, it's not you. We just decided that your body is this and this and this, and that is not your body. So these are words. And then you go to do something, and what is not your body, and that's not yours. Don't you know what to do this? Da, 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 da. This is all manufactured. This is very Western conscious stuff, way up in the left brain corner of language. And we know how sophisticated it is because this is what attorneys do. They don't look at life. They don't look at restoring overall balance. They say, well, based on 1987's precedent, back in Louisiana in Cage versus Gord, it was shown based on the way this little dongle of an idea relates to this little dongle idea, and how this ties into this principle of this document that was written 200 years ago, that this is the correct and the only correct interpretation of the law. Bravo! Give him $400 an hour. He connected a whole bunch of little dots that he made up, or that, we're all aspiring to learn because this is what civilization is. So this is all, masculine. To break things into every little dot and then obsess over them. This is the company that has 10,000 employee rules. This is the IRS, which has so many rules you can't even figure it out. So you have to hire a professional to read the bizarre language, and then they can't figure it out. And then you have to, be audited, and your tax preparer made a mistake, and screw me. I mean, I can't read your absurd documents. You don't even know them yourself. I have to talk to your supervisor. So this is, and so the meta conversation about this is a bit of a rant about over-masculinizing the world. So it's not necessarily attuning at all to where you're at. It's just what popped into mind. But if you know the heuristics of my symbols, if I know that looking good determines 50% of my value in your eyes, here's the reason it's important. It's not important because I'm going to start looking good. Though, if I love you and you're not able to let that go, I might put on some nice attire from time to time. It is to bring conscious attention to the shortcut and examine the shortcut. I had a woman who called me up recently after 10 years. And I'd been interested in her 10 years ago. But she was 20 years older than me. And this was not at all an issue for me. But she had told me that we were not a good fit. And she called me up and she said, Dane, I have dated 200 men in the last 10 years. And I've realized I was a fool. My whole thing with you, I had better conversations with you. You were kind, you were warm, you were sensitive. it was a wonderful experience for me. But I tried to imagine what it would be like to grow old together. And I just thought I needed to find someone like you who was 20 years older. And I've spent 10 years and 200 dates looking, and I haven't found it. And I've decided that placing that amount of emphasis on age, meaning I could have had 10 years with you, and I'd be right where I am now. She said, I'm sorry I broke it off. I'm sorry I did it rudely. I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth. And I wanted to let you know how special you are. And of course the age gap is even bigger, because now she's 70. Well, the age gap isn't bigger, but it's going into that time where the age gap starts to make a difference. And my response was, thank you for telling me. Thank you for realizing it, because age, in my experience, is not a good basis for determining something. That no one can even say how long something will last. Meaning there are many good reasons to end a relationship. Many good reasons that have nothing to do with age or love. Meaning sometimes if you really love someone, you'll end the relationship because you recognize that both of you value growth highly and that they will grow more, either single or with another person, that the relationship has plateaued for a reason neither person can resolve, either because they can't or they won't. Either way, it's not resolving. And so I'm with my partner now, who's, a lot of my life I was 10, 20, 30 years older than me. My partner's 20 years younger. Of course, I thought, gosh, this is not good. I looked for an older woman with these traits. The odds seem a little more common, but I'm not going to throw away a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to grow like mad, to heal like mad, to share value back and forth in ways I've never done it with anyone else in my life. It just happens to come in a young form. I'm not going to let that get in the way any more than I would let it get in the way if someone, my first girlfriend was twice my age, which was the irony with this woman, because I went on to date other older women and had great relationships. In fact, the best relationship of my life was with someone twice my age. Age is not that important. It is not denying that it is not a factor. But when we forget why, we lose our ability to weigh something. And if you can have 95% of what you want, but you hate red, and this person has a red Porsche, are you going to throw away 95% of what you want because you hate red? Or are you going to say, wow, I get 95% of what I want, and A, let me offer to paint the car. Is there any other car I could paint the car for you? Because I absolutely love you, and I am not dumb enough to throw you away because we don't agree on color, or we don't agree on the president, or we don't agree on the best healthcare strategy. I am not dumb enough to throw you away because we don't agree on this point and this point. But is there a way to tone that down a little bit at my expense. You know, I'm not going to sit here in an entitled attitude and say, well, you're 93%. You could bring it up to 95% if you painted your Porsche lime green. That's my favorite color. I know that's your favorite color, but, you know, it's up to you to be the person I want you to be. I'm not going to play that game. I'm not going to insult an exceptional person with this kind of entitlement. I'm going to show up. And I'm going to pay more attention. Am I anywhere close to who they want to be? I'm lucky to find 93%. This is astounding. This is astounding. How am I for you? Okay, I'm only 82%. You willing to accept me? Well, that's awfully generous of you. How can I bring my value up to 93 so we're on an even par? You know, like, what if, you know, are you attracted to blondes or this, that, and the other? You know, how could I make who I am even more delightful for you? Because you're amazing as you are. That's, you know, a great meta conversation. You know, as you meet someone and realize there's great potential, to have a meta conversation about how to mutually increase each other's value. That's a great meta conversation. And what meta conversations do is that while the straight conversation is, can I get you a cup of coffee? It just takes 1 minute. The meta conversation is the whole lifetime that goes between these two dots. Up here, up here, up here. It's the memory of last year's coffee. It's this, it's this, it's this. And finally, the coffee arrives and an eternity has passed. You know things about each other that you didn't even know you didn't know. You don't take it personally. I had a woman, I held her in my arms for like 4 hours. I just found her weeping, and someone had just broken her heart. And I just held her for 4 hours as she cried and wept, and she remembered it years later and thanked me. But after weeping for 4 hours, we talked about a meta conversation about why we didn't click. And she said she had a very sensitive nose, and that I always had a slight body odor, which is perfectly true. And that, you know, for us to click, I would need to be, you know, showering and deodorizing and stuff all the time. But other than that, she found me attractive. And I said that I loved her emotion and her vulnerability and all that. But that she needed to know what she wanted. You know, the way I'd heard her talking about various men in her life and all that, is that it leaves me feeling like I'm just set up to fail. Because this man does this and you complain about him, this man does this, you complain about him, but you've never really said, I really, really want this and I'll be completely satisfied if I have this. She's like, yeah, there's this and this, and I don't really know. And I said, well, I get that if I cleaned up and showered regularly, I'd be, you know, a reasonable match for you in that way, and you get that, you know, you need to be clear. And it didn't change the fact that we had a closer bond holding her in some of her deepest pain for 4 hours. And that spark of connection, you know, stands out as a peak moment. She wrote to me about it. That's a conversation about the conversation. And one of the greatest gifts is so much of this is not personal. And so much of it is the unique lens of who we are. I have a mind that gets clear on points in a moment, and if I follow it, I can follow that thread for hours. But if I tell myself, no, I can't do that. First I have to do this, then I have to comb my hair, then I have to take a shower, then I have to do this, then I have to do this, then I have to... The thread is lost. And by the time I do the 5 to 20 things that this culture says I have to do in order to do X, Y, Z, there's no magic left. There's no thread. And having experimented both ways, I've chosen the magic. I've chosen the thread. And it just so happens that that requires me to be unpolished in a wide range of areas, from my, appearance to, any number of odd things. And that's the cards I'm dealt with. I have a brain like this. And this is the way that I choose, given those choices, to follow the magic. And of course, my dream, when I make a spontaneous production like this, my dream is that there's 2 to 5% that you're part of a minority that joins me in placing the magic above the correct protocol, that joins me in the excitement of sharing these ideas more than the obsession with whatever the cultural norm is. And that we will connect on that basis. That's my dream. And the power of meta conversations for me, when I'm with someone in person, is that there is a very large percentage of people that on a shortcut basis does not accept each other. Meaning shortcuts. This person voted for Bush, so I can't deal with that. This person has a gun in their has. Anyone who has a gun in their house is not someone I can date. This person is, has an offshore investment fund. This person is a billionaire. Anyone who has that kind of money, I know they cheated and so I want nothing to do with it. There's a large percentage of people that cannot relate to a large percentage of people based on shortcuts. But what I've learned is that a large percentage of that group, if they care enough, if they're humble enough, if they make time enough to break down what the shortcuts mean. What does it mean that you can't date someone with a gun in your house? Well, I could never date someone who thought that killing in a human life was more important than money. And the only reason to have a gun in the house is if you're going to shoot someone to protect your possessions. And I do not believe in that. And so I don't even want someone with a gun in their house. So this is the long version for the shortcut, right? You see, they've told you the code, what it means. This is the meta conversation. So what you're really saying is that anyone who values money more than a human life is someone you can't date. But you haven't thought about that recently, have you? Because you're dating a CEO who doesn't have a gun in the house, who's part of a chemical factory, who is regularly choosing components in the chemical factory that is causing cancer in a 1-mile radius around his factory. And he knows it, and he's suppressing it support. In other words, you're marrying someone who's putting human life on a large scale every day below money. You didn't think it through, did you? You just made the shortcut to the gun. And he doesn't have a gun in the house. He's killing people with his chemicals. Do you want to know that? That's just too complicated. Do you want to know that? Or, I just got a gun in my house, and here's why. I watched this scene of this woman being raped and tortured in front of her husband, and I could give a shit about the money in the house. But I realized I couldn't watch my girlfriend be treated that way and not have the power to stop it. And so it would just take me a few $100s. And if I took some shooting lessons, I would have the power to stop that if that ever happened to her. It's like, wow, I want a man that cares that much about me and my dignity. So you can kind of see that a lot of shortcuts go both ways. I want a man who can provide for his family. I look at his shoes, I look at this, da-da-da-da-da. You don't have that. You're not for me. What about the billionaires that walk around in rags? Who can provide for their family and provide beautifully. But their message is they care more about engaging and making other people feel comfortable and seeing the interaction that's beyond the money. And so they're sidestepping all the symbols of money so that they can relate on a human level. And this is a person who's overcome the temptation of power and lust. Because they could have both by displaying their symbols, but they're choosing not to. You want a man like that. So, and I'm talking in the dating analogy, but the point is, the meta conversation is what frees up these locked doors. And most of these symbols go both ways. And the real magic does not happen when you have a silent meta-conversation that does not exist for your partner. What do I mean? You have a gun. They know it exists to protect you from rape and that money doesn't matter. You know it exists because they value money more than human life, including your own, that you're not even as valuable as money. So you've got a word here. This is a symbol. And it means this thing to this person, and it means this thing to this person. A headdress, a Muslim headdress, means honor and devotion, etc. to so-and-so, means oppression and racism and chauvinism, male chauvinism to X person. It's the same symbol. It cannot mean that. Guns always mean this. Headdresses always mean this. Voting conservative always means this. But it doesn't. Because it's like shortcuts on a desktop. You create a little icon there, and then you decide what file that links to. Now someone else creates the same little icon and they link it to another file. The meta conversation is not at the level of the shortcut. The meta conversation is at the level of the file that the shortcut accesses. And here's the thing. Every single human being accesses a different file when they tap the shortcut on friend, when they tap the shortcut on great husband or great spouse, when they tap the shortcut on gun, when they tap the shortcut on Christianity, when they tap the shortcut on conservative, when they tap the shortcut on higher degree education. Every single human on the planet pulls up a slightly different file with these shortcuts. We're not having the same conversation when we're just at the level of words. I love you. I love you. Two completely different realities, which is why you will never connect. You will never connect and never see someone deeply unless you take the conversation below the desktop shortcut into the file that accesses, the meaning of that word, the connotation, the flavor, the feeling, the texture, the ways you've seen that used, the looks it's associated with, the values behind those stories. That is where we exist as unique human beings. And to join someone there in their file system, and the meanings and the reasons and the values for those files, is to go deep into code. It's to go deep into raw code in a way that most human beings never do. Meta conversations, the conversation about the conversation, the questions that deepen a conversation. Is this the most exciting conversation we could be having right now? What would increase its value? What does this topic mean? Why would changing from this to this increase your value 50%? Oh, I see. It reminds you of a boss that raped you. And this one lets you forget it. I see. Okay. Now I know that you've got unresolved trauma. And I know your coping strategy for dealing with it. And if I care about you, maybe I can be of service. Maybe I can bring you some help. And if I don't care enough, what am I doing? Just chasing another body? Am I saying that the more people I have sex with, the more important? What does that file mean? We don't ever see someone until we go beyond the shortcuts into the files that they access. This takes time. It takes 1 second to say the word. It takes 1 second to press the shortcut. It may take a month to read that file. What does love mean? What does that look mean? What does shame mean? It may take a month. But in that month, I discover an entire world I knew nothing about. And I'm either closer to you in knowing how far away we are, or I'm closer to you in knowing that we're closer than I ever thought. Because you've linked a similar file to love that I've linked to hate. I know that file. I've read this. I have this file. I just linked it to the word love. You linked it to hate. So when I said I love you, you weren't happy. When you said you hated me, I wasn't happy. But we were saying the same thing. It's a powerful tool. It's as deep as the ocean. The meta about the meta about the meta about the meta about the meta. If you explore this tool, I invite you to share the fruits. And thank you for watching.